Hello, and welcome to How to Prepare for the Enforcement of the EU GDPR in 2018. So a quick overview of today's call. I will give you first a brief introduction into who Bizagi are, then take you through some key bullets, what the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, means, what the impacts are, and how Bizagi's digital process platform can help you to mitigate with those challenges. At the end, we will take 5 minutes to answer some of your questions, so please feel free to post them as we go through the presentation. If we don't manage to answer them all, we will make sure the team to do so after this presentation. So first, to introduce myself, my name is Holger Stutzke. At Bizagi, I'm focused on the financial service market, and I'm caring about our banking customers in Germany, Austria, Switzerland. Since several years, I worked on concepts how digital platforms, as Bizagi, can help to comply with regulations. Even though I'm on the banking space, across all industries, banks are high experienced in managing compliance requirements. But I just want to highlight here that GDPR affects all industries in all countries. In addition, I would like to introduce Mr. Martin Stepanek, who will give some of his insights on the topic of data privacy regulations. Mr. Stepanek worked in many business process projects, for example, for Generali, for Deloitte, and many other companies as a business analyst. He has more than 20 years experience in financial services, in delivering complex business process solutions and enterprise architecture. So before we start, a few words first on Bizagi to help those of you who don't know Bizagi understand why we have such a credible voice in digital transformation. Bizagi offers a digital business platform that has enabled the digital process automation programs of over 500 enterprise customers worldwide. We're headquartered in the UK with operations across North America, Europe, and Latin America. Many of you will know us from our continued leadership position in the BPM space. But less of you may understand how our platform is being used for a much wider goal, so that of helping companies achieve the digital transformation objectives. We do this by wrapping their legacy systems with an agile, process-centric application layer, delivering an engaging, connected experience to digitize their operations. Quite a wordy sentence, but we'll explore what this means over the next half an hour. Here you see a selection of some of the 500 customers we work with around the world and a few of our key global partners. One of the key takeaways, you'll see that a broad range of industries are represented here. You should also note that a lot of these companies represent what you may call incumbent players, large established companies who, by definition, were often those that feel the challenge represented by younger, born digital agile competitors. And that is important to note in relation to the content we'll be sharing today. So hopefully that gives you a basic understanding of Bizagi and our work on major transformation programs around the world. So but now we are going to look at which changes the new European General Data Privacy Regulatory will drive in your company and how Bizagi can support you. I guess you know that GDPR will go effective May next year after a 2 years period of implementation. So heavy preparation is done, but almost 1 year you have left for preparing the requirements of GDPR. I just want to go back one step. There are several reasons for the EU to implement GDPR. So first was one major requirement that the several data privacy regulatory and regulations in the EU should be harmonized. And doing this, adapt them to the challenges of the new digital era. Second, it was really important to give back control over the private data to EU citizens. For example, that a customer has the right to go to your company and say, I want that you delete all the information you've stored about me. The third one, maybe not so obvious reason, is to bring the European Union in a better position, I would say, against companies, especially in other regions in the world. You can imagine that this could be heading for US companies, especially regarding the situation between some data privacy initiatives. So why should you care about this? The first side, what you see, is the painful fines which are implemented in the GDPR. So per incident, it could be 4% of your global revenue or 20 million euro, whichever is greater. If you're a smaller company, you could say those fines could kill me. And for sure, that is intended not to kill you, but to set the sense of urgency on data privacy. In addition, GDPR introduces hard response times. For example, in case of a data breach, you have 72 hours to inform the leading authority. And in some cases, additional the customers who are affected at a data breach. And for sure, if you have a look into the data stored in your system, collecting all required data is not an easy job. Another hot topic, and maybe change to the existing data privacy regulatory, is that the regulatory is not just heading for the European Union. It should protect the EU citizens, which means if you are a company, for example, a Chinese retailer, and you provide an online shop and web shop where you have goods to sell in an euro currency, you are under GDPR. So it's sufficient to aim making deals with EU citizens to be under GDPR. Nevertheless, where located in the world you are. I would like to have a look into some special things regarding the GDPR. GDPR introduces some special roles. For example, the DPO, the Data Protection Officer, a role which is already implemented in most of the companies, but the role dramatically changes. In the past or currently, a DPO should aim for complying with the regulations. In future, he should guarantee, and this is a dramatical change because he's responsible at the end for a company to comply with the GDPR. This means maybe it's not easy to convince your DPO to take over this role. In addition, there's some special things, for example, that he should stay more than a few years in this role. And even though it's easy to think about nominating a DPO, it could be much harder in the future. Another topic I want to highlight, which is not mentioned in all discussions, but maybe really important, is that currently the authorities are really lazy in looking after violations of data privacy. In future, with GDPR, they have a higher motivation because they are able to claim some of the fine, the amount of the fine, for themselves. So we expect this will change the number of active requests from the authorities dramatically. I want to ask Martin. Martin, can you give us a little bit your impression from your project, your experience from the companies, what GDPR means for a DPO who's currently in charge?
Yes, hello. Speaking about the data protection officer, there is an example of the qualifications, which is law degree and specialization in the privacy law. But in the same way, the DPO need to be aware or knowledgeable or expert of the processes within the company and with the security and IT security. So this is quite challenging combination of qualifications. Another interesting or important point is that DPO is independent on the management in the way that he reports to management, but he should not receive instructions from the management, and he should work independently, and he should or she should communicate with the regulator about the data protection issues.
Thanks a lot, Martin, for your insight on that topic.
Okay.
So another thing which I want to highlight, or maybe to put on the table, is two concepts which are always mentioned with the GDPR. This is privacy by default and privacy by design. Both concepts focus on the idea that all processes running in your company should be reviewed on one side and restricted to the minimum of private data as possible. Or vice versa, you are only allowed to use the data which is required to provide the service to the customer. That means, in addition, you need to think about including a data governance for all of your processes, which means not just for a system, not just for a business process overall. To be safe, that all data is stored in a safe way, that only the persons who need to see the data can see this data. And one concept which is in the past not well thought through is including a method to deleting data which is not required anymore. So delete of data is not a concept which is really old, but will be really important in future if you're heading for a GDPR. Let's have a quick view on the special case of data breach, because this is highlighted in GDPR very often. I just highlight this number for you, that it's not a question if the case of a data breach happens, it's a question when it happens. As mentioned before, you know that you need proactively communicate about a deep data breach to the authorities within 70 hours. If you look in your systems and how your topology looks like, I think it's not easy to fulfill this within 72 hours. Just think about, it's not just your data or stored in your system. Think about your subsidiaries. Think about suppliers who maybe have use of data, which is personal data. Or maybe think about cloud solutions and so on. So it's not easy to fulfill the 72 hours time frame. So if a DPO, for example, has no methods and policies in place to prevent the data breach, and on the other side, he misses to communicate the breach to the authorities, he will be fined twice, which means, in that case, 40 million euro. So it's one incident, but it's two violations. Bottom line is, a data breach itself could kill your company. So it's not just the hard fine behind it. Think about the negative press, especially, so I'm working in the banking space, especially for banks, but for other companies as well. And in conjunction with this, the people and the customers who are running away. So it's really important to have a focus on data breaches and how to prevent this. And on the other hand, the authorities will have an eye on that. They are motivated to identify such cases. So now let's move on to the interesting things, what you should or could do. So I've put some bullets together, which looks in the first sight like common sense and sounds easy to implement. For example, to nominate a data protection officer sounds not really complicated, but if you remember the changed responsibility, it could be complicated, more complicated than it sounds in the first sight. I don't go into depth into all of these bullets. So first of all, I want to ask Martin from his experience, what your impression is, Martin, how companies prepare for GDPR, maybe from the status from today or what is coming in the next couple of months?
Thank you for asking. What I see the most is a surprise how extensive the GDPR impact is on the company. There is personal information protection legislature introduced before, so companies expect sometimes that they have work done, but this is the case. The GDPR is much more extensive, and it brings completely new challenges. You need to protect the data, but you need to be able to say what you do with the data, with the personal data, where it is processed, why, what is this, and so on. So this is something which can be seen, but it's becoming now that the company are aware of the challenge.
Thank you, Martin. It was a little bit hard to understand, but great stuff. So I want to dig into two of these bullets. The first bullet is the number 8 about DPIA. DPIA is called Data Protection Impact Assessment. A Data Protection Impact Assessment is a process which is initiated by your data protection officer to test your IT systems, your business processes, and the policies, if they are and how they are complying with the GDPR. For sure, you can imagine that this assessment is a complex process with many checklists and many involved parties in your company. Think about your systems you have in use. The complete IT department could be involved to getting this test and this assessment done. In addition, this DPIA is not just a one-off exercise you need to do. It's an instant process which needs to be renewed on a regular basis. At the end, the outcome of a DPIA is a comprehensive documentation about the degree of complying with GDPR and which policies you need to be implement to meet the regulation. So another one, just want to highlight on that case is, it sounds easy, but to implement a process for the case of a data breach. So what happens if a data breach takes place? So if you're not prepared, you have a process in place, it's really hard to meet the 72 hours time frame. So it's really important to think through those processes before and to implement maybe a digital process to support your company in performing a data breach information process. On the other side, what's important as well, because the GDPR makes you responsible for protecting the data, you need to be really sure to have all contracts with your suppliers, with your subsidiaries in place, to be sure that you can meet the time frame. So let's move on. What effect or where can process automation help to address GDPR? Maybe between the lines, you have heard about a little bit what we can do there. First one is, and where we are really concentrating on, is that we can help you on performing data privacy impact assessment, DPIA. You remember this regular process, so not just a one-off thing where you need to test and document your system, business workflows, and policies. We, from Bizagi, we have established a set of workflows to help your data privacy officer to perform DPIAs. The outcome is a full-blown up documentation and recommendation of policies to implement. In addition, Bizagi helps to manage all the involved entities. So you can imagine that this is some kind of project which must be controlled in some kind, and that can Bizagi help with the digital platform. And so we make sure that the required information and answers are collected right in time to perform the DPIA. You can see you need DPIA for all your systems, IT systems in first sight, but non-IT systems as well. You need to rethink and go through all your business processes, all the variations of business processes. And at the end, you need to define policies which fills the gap between. And all these bullets, Bizagi can help with our process platform. The logical next step, and this is where we can help as well, is that the outcome of the DPIA, which means changes in policies, need to be implemented in your systems. And you can implement it like you have done it always. So do changes in a core system, to do something in the IT systems. But at the end, it's much more interesting to use the GDPR to implement a data governance layer between your systems and your business processes. And this is exactly where we can support as well, where you can get the findings you have in the DPIA and realize it with the Bizagi platform. At this point, I just want to highlight there's a session following our session now, which dig in a demo what DPIA means from Bizagi perspective. So you can see how we, in concrete situations, help DPO performing DPIAs. So interesting thing following right after our session here. Another topic, and this is all, I would say, strategic things I've talked before, where we can help. But we can help on, I would say, hands-on, on-demand stuff. For example, implementing a process for data breaches, which is an easy thing for a Bizagi platform to help you and control the process of a data breach. For example, another thing is if a customer picks up the phone to your call center or logs a question in the portal about which information is stored in your system, which is a process itself. This is where Bizagi can help really, really fast to implement it and connect to your system or give your call center the ability to initiate such kind of cases. So this is something you can do really soon and really fast with our solution, and which could be in line with strategic things you can do with Bizagi on GDPR topics. So it's not much time today to go more in depth into topics, and we know we have some time left where experience is collected and we are working hard with companies together on GDPR topics. I would like to pick up some of your questions. So if you haven't already submitted questions in the system, please submit your questions on the live chat now. I will pick it up. We have 5 minutes to answer your questions, and I will have a look into which question we already have. So I've seen one question, and Martin, you are free to answer as well. So there's one question about different regions, I see. So the question is, are there differences how different regions prepare for GDPR? Yes, from my perspective, maybe Martin can put his sense later on too. What we've seen, or what I've talked before, is that GDPR is heading a little bit against US companies. So we don't need to talk about why. It is. And if I have a look, for example, at Apple or Amazon or other big US companies with a good intention on the European market, they are really well prepared for GDPR. So just look at the site of Apple.com, for example, of data privacy. They are really take this serious and have implemented processes and are well prepared for the GDPR. If I look, for example, in the European spaces, there are some who are well prepared, but most of the companies are not prepared. Maybe they have not seen that there's a bigger issue coming to them. Some of them have missed to comply with the existing regulatory and now see that they need to do something on that topic. But at the end, some of the companies, I think it's just documentation. And this is the wrong perception of GDPR. It's not just documentation. It's the whole process of assessment over IT systems, over business processes and policies, and to implement them. At the end, you need to document this, for sure, but you need to do something on that topic as well. Martin, do you have some insights on that too?
Regionally, it's similar scope, but you can have local certifications for differences. In Europe, it applies to European Union.
Okay. Martin, you're really hard to understand. The line is a little bit broken. So I just pick up another question. So we are heading now for the end. So I just want to pick up one. The question is, what must employers do in relation to employee data collected from corporate managed devices? So I'm not really sure. Maybe this is a special case because it's not about customer data. GDPR is just heading for data privacy on the customer side. But this is a good question. I think we will answer them afterwards. So it's something I can't tell you directly. So Martin, do you have any insights on that?
Not at this point.
Okay, good. We will answer it afterwards. No problem. I have one additional question, last question, I guess, now. Which GDPR use cases do you support? I've mentioned some of them. If you know Bizagi platform a little bit, you know it's a really generic platform. So you can do your own things on that platform. Important is to keep in mind that governance or data privacy governance is set in place. So that means we support all kinds of use cases you can imagine. But from our side, in the discussion with our customers, we have identified some of them which are really useful. Beneath the ones I've already mentioned, which is, for example, the data breach use case or the DPIA assessment use case, you have this use case of request of a customer about information about the stored private data. You have the request of deleting this data. Both are processes which could be realized with Bizagi. And there's something where we are fully struggling a little bit, but which are really interesting is moving data from one company to another, which is also covered by the GDPR, where we are talking about common interfacing between competition, which is really interesting if you're having a cloud solution on that topic. We are digging into it, but currently we have not the solution prepared, but we are working on that. So I think we are almost heading towards the end. Just want to highlight and thank you for your input, your questions. If you have more questions, just reach out to us, to the team of Bizagi. We are happy to help you on that topic. We work with lawyers or external data protection officers on solutions. We are working with customers on that solution. So we are happy to help you and help you to be prepared for GDPR in May next year. Just want to highlight again the webinar which is following this webinar, which is about DPIA process, how it's covered in our solution. And just want to say, and you find it on our webpage, you can trial and test Bizagi for free. Just download it and try it out. For those of you who want more insights or best practice, you find it on our webpage as well, from white paper to webinar, customer case studies, and so on. And so I think we are pretty sharp on time. So many thanks again for joining us, and have a great day. Bye-bye.